Good to see you. Hey, Deputy, you on?
All right, man. Yeah, come
You stay, Tom. You all right?
What's that?
Sorry I didn't announce you were here at the meeting. You know, I'm not one for the BS sentimentality shit.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Tom, what you up to, boy? Good. That's what I'm talking about.
I ain't got nothing to complain.
No, I don't know.
I'd like to call the December 10th East Ascension Drainage meeting to order. Looks like Mr. Turner's absent. That's all. Everyone else is present. Mr. Claude, would you lead with the invocation followed by the pledge?
I sure will. Everyone please stand. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for this gathering. Lord, as we get upon the cold weather for this season, we ask that you look toward your neighbors, look toward the elderly and the young. Let's reach out our hands to those that do not have and give them a hand and work them through this season, especially this season of Thanksgiving for your Son, Jesus Christ. We ask this in his name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone wishing to speak on any agenda item, please sign in with Ms. Deb. Before we move on to number 4, I'm going to need to move number 7, 8, and 9 after number 5. And we'll be passing on 12, 13, and 14. With that being said, number 4, the acceptance of the minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Sadley, second by Mr. Johnny, for the November 5th minutes. Number 5 on the chairman's report. I'd just like to thank everyone. This has been a big year. A lot of ditches cleaned. Thank God our tax got renewed, and we're looking forward to the new year. A lot of good things happening. Just want to thank everyone for that. I would like to move on to number 7, 8, and 9. Mr. Malcolm?
You need to do a motion just to amend it. Amend the agenda. Did you take it out of order?
Second.
All right.
Moved by Mr. Claude, second by Mr. Aaron. Anyone in opposition to that? Not. Mr. Malcolm?
Good evening.
Evening.
I have two resolutions and a pro se verbal regarding the tax renewal for the drainage district. First resolution, which you need to be considered and adopted by the council, is a resolution providing for the canvassing the returns and declaring the result of the special election held in the East Ascension Consolidated Gravity Drainage District number 1 of the parish of Ascension, Louisiana, on Tuesday, November 6, 2018, to authorize the renewal of the levy and collection of a 5 mil ad valorem tax for a period of 10 years, beginning in the year 2019 and ending in the year 2028, to provide funds to pay for the operation and maintenance costs and expenses of the drainage works of the district.
Move to adopt.
Moved by Mr. Claude, second by Mr. Bill Dawson. Discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Not. Motion carries.
Second document is the pro se verbal of the canvass of the votes cast at the election held in East Ascension Consolidated Gravity Drainage District number 1 of the parish of Ascension, Louisiana, on Tuesday, November 6, 2018.
Motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johnny, second by Ms. Terry.
I need to finish.
Go ahead.
You gotta read it off.
Got to read it.
The polling place above specified being the only polling places designated at which to hold the election, it was therefore shown that there was a total of 24,597 votes cast in favor of the proposition, a total of 12,017 votes cast against the proposition, as here and above set forth. The majority of 24,597 votes cast in favor of the proposition passed.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? None. Motion carries.
Finally, a resolution directing the renewal of the levy and collection of an ad valorem tax of 5 mills on the dollar of assessed valuation of all properties subject to taxation within the geographic boundaries of its East Ascension Consolidated Gravity Drainage District, number 1 of the parish of Ascension, Louisiana, for a period of 10 years, beginning in the year 2019 and ending in the year 2028, authorized under the provisions of Article 6, Section 30 of the Constitution of the State of Louisiana, 1974, as amended, LARS 38:1768, and other constitutional and statutory authority as applicable to provide funds to pay the operation and maintenance costs and expenses of the drainage works of the district and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
Move to adopt.
Moved by Mr. Dawson, second by
Second.
Mr. Johnny. Discussion? None. Motion passed.
Thank you, Council.
All right, we'll move to number 6, the drainage report. Mr. Turo and Mr. Salvo.
Just go over real quick, gentlemen, ladies, about the month of November. Last weekend we had a pretty good event with the rain. Looked at the forecast and we enacted Marvin Bro on Friday ahead of the event. We shut the gates at Bluff Swamp Friday as well, Friday afternoon. Sorrento pumping station was already down, but we did enact it Saturday morning. Everything weathered very well through the event, and all stations are back open now, except for the Frog Bayou is still closed, waiting on Manchac to drop some. In addition to that, I think we have 32 ditch maintenance requests was completed in the month of November, and our contractor's moving well. In addition to our crews, and the second crew that you guys voted on has now been mobilized as well, so they're progressing well. And that concludes my end of the report.
The New River Drainage Project continues in the design phase. Nothing really new on that, but it's still being worked on. We hope to have something progressed on that shortly. HNTB will make a presentation. It's item number 10 that will review the large drainage projects being proposed. A lot of them were proposed by the council, so they're going to make a presentation later. BKI, Bert Kleinpeter, is finalizing plans for the Marvin Bro pump station, both the backflow and the stop log projects. Those two are close to being finalized, so I'm thinking next couple of months we should have final plans on those. Brian Hammett and Associates is working on the Ascension Parish Drainage Improvement Project. That cleans the ditches and replaces driveway pipes for Penny Street, Savoy Road, Shealy Drive, and Riverside Estates Drive. We had the mandatory pre-bid meeting Tuesday, December the 4th. We had 13 bidders show up for that meeting. Bids will be accepted on Tuesday, December 18th. And once we receive bids there, we'll have a contract ready to get those roads worked on. That should happen shortly thereafter. The Fish Bayou project is still under construction, not construction, but under design phase. There was a meeting that Councilman Casso and Kimberly Cole of GSA had with a couple of property owners in the Ridge Road area. And my understanding was that there was positive feedback on the project. The project was explained to them, and they did get good feedback on that. That one is still, in the design phase, so we hope to get something done on that one also shortly. And that concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Mr. Dawson.
Maybe not for Joey, maybe for Ron, Joey, but just, Ron, if you will, tell me about how you talked about the rainfall that we had. How do you make the decision about, or who makes the decision about starting the pumps in Sorrento? I get these calls if there's 2 inches of rain.
Yes, sir.
The councilman did, are the pumps running in Sorrento? And I'll go on the webpage and look it up. But I'm wondering how that decision is made, and is there anything automated about that?
We do keep that reservoir in elevation -1 in the reservoir. So prior to any event, they keep those areas pumped down. So you're starting off prior to any event with retention there. Mr. Thad Denham is the manager that is over that particular area, and he does evaluate that on every basis of an event coming. He will watch it and see what he needs to do. And he consults with me, and we inform the administration prior to, but it's mainly amount of rainfall that'll come in that area. The east winds really don't affect it because we keep it closed. So it's mainly their amount of rainfall falling within Sorrento boundaries is what affects it. But we do watch it, and like I said, we start off every event pumped down, and that is his procedure of every week. At the end of the week, make sure we're down, and we monitor events as they occur.
So like this past weekend, we have that event on Saturday. So does somebody comes out? How does that?
We have
again, do we have more? I assume we have more than one person that's.
Absolutely, yes. He has backup. His manager that works under him, he does back him up, and we have these river gauges that can tell us as the event is happening. They update hourly, and you'll see in a later item, those are crucial to our operation, not only there, but all of these flood control structures. We know how to read them, and we know how to make judgment calls based on them in certain situations. But that is key, but institutional knowledge has a lot to do with it as well.
Well, just a comment is that, having worked in the industry for a long time, most of that is automated. Do we ever think about that, or we
do
we're talking about a few pumps down there that's not, compared to running a refinery, it's not that big a deal, but
right.
I'm wondering, have we thought about it? Is that in a plan anywhere to where these could be turned on automatically based on the level in the reservoir?
I would say that has been talked about, but it's never been tasked out to look into it, what it would take.
Okay.
And that may be portion of something we could look at this new contract with this engineering board that we have now. It may be something that we can look at and just get a proposal from them, what it would take, and get an idea about it and bring it back to you guys.
So, and if you do that, I'd like, if it's possible, to have that some kind of web page or something there where people can see, hey, the pump's running and then it's, flowing a certain rate or whatever the information they can get from that.
We'd have to see what the possibilities
Yeah,
are.
I'm just commenting.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sadler.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ron et al., I just want to publicly thank your group. The 600-foot safety fix on Swamp Road, which had, of course, a drainage component. I'm getting several emails on that and 2 or 3 other things in my district. The most common comment I hear is that the drainage ditch dock in my neck of the woods has been cleaned out without me even having to ask. That's a big step in the right direction. So
I did thank, I believe, Mike Enlow and asked him to distribute the emails of these people to you. I don't know if you got them, but hats off to you guys as well. Probably should have included Ron Annette, Davin Duplessis. So please thank him for me as well. But that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
I would say our department would appreciate that, Mr. Satterley, and as a group, as a whole, we are trying to be proactive. Is when we go work a work order, if we do see things there, we try to address it as much as we can while we're in the area.
Right. Thank you for that, Ron. I've warned everybody. I don't know why that we still have some reluctance, especially in my district, to use the system we have. But I guess we'll always have a little bit of the old police jury system when they call us directly. But it's wonderful to me to hear someone say, this happened and I didn't even have to ask for it. That to me means that we're getting the routine maintenance and we're getting bang for our buck on that private contractor program we have. So that's real positive. Thank you.
Mr. Long.
Ditto, everything he said.
Mr. Glua.
Getting the same calls. That's
Real
good.
quick, thank you both. All you do. And like I said, I'm a different from Councilman Dawson that the type of pumping equipment we have, things like that, I'd rather have some eyes on the ground. I like to know that y'all are out there prior to an event, that you monitor the events coming. And you're out there prior to the event. I know there's a lot of intake cleaning got to be done before we kick this equipment on and stuff like that, you know. So right now, I just disagree with a float switch, you know what I mean? Where it comes on at a certain level, goes off at another. So I do agree with Mr. Dawson on the fact that maybe some kind of notice that could be published somewhere within the internet or whatever on our parish web or district web, and a possible notice out to the council members that's involved in these districts that, hey, we're kicking the pumps on, you know, we're kicking the pumps off, whatever, you know, everything looked good, you know.
I'll reach out to administration. We'll get some thoughts together on that and bring something back to you.
Thank you, sir.
Hold up, Mr. Terry. Go ahead, Ed.
A quick question. I got a couple calls from some neighbors of a new subdivision they're building, and there's a lack of erosion control. Who would I call for that? Who would they call for that? You know, you got to put up like the pine straw and the hay and all. They're not doing that in some areas. It's flowing into their ditches. I just wasn't sure who to tell them to call, and I talked to them right before the meeting.
May I answer that question for you, Councilman?
No, I want them to.
I'm in a better position, so
Yes,
I'm gonna take executive privilege here. We just hired a new stormwater manager, so he will be on top of that right now. Stephen Bolello is doing that, but we just hired a new stormwater manager, and he's going through human resources being processed, and he will be handling those things in the future. But if you'll get with me and let me know where it's at, we'll take care of it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Terry.
Yeah, of course, I want to thank you. Ron responds to me. Y'all are just not as nice as I am, because Ron answers my text anytime I need to know what my floodgate status is. Bless his heart, whether it's 10:30 at night or 6:30 in the morning, and I'm very grateful. Thank you so much on behalf of my constituents. Everybody knows that my folks back on the Ridge Road love to know, and they live a long way from those floodgates, so they're very curious about when they're open and when they're closed. So thank you very much, Ron, for your response to my questions.
Part of the job. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lambert.
Yeah, the storm drainage manager that we hired, will he be looking at like subdivision? We got some sensitive areas and some subdivisions that's getting developed in the parish. Will he look at some of that, or are we still just going by what CSRS tells us?
Well, he will be doing the stormwater permitting for those subdivisions. But in terms of whether or not the subdivisions are meeting the ordinances, that'll still be CSRS's responsibility.
But he will look at it. Could he overturn it, is what I'm saying, because sometimes I have one right now that's pretty sensitive for its flooding.
So he's not going to be responsible for drainage.
Okay.
Only stormwater.
Yeah, and that's what this is, right next to the canal.
Okay.
Blackberry
then
Canal.
if it's a stormwater issue, then he'd be happy to look at. If it's a drainage issue, then CSRS will be looking at it.
He could get with Jerome on that. If Jerome knows which one I'm talking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnny?
Yeah, just echo all the thanks and appreciation. I accidentally dialed Ron about a week ago, and he called me right back, thinking I needed something. But y'all have been responsive in my district. My constituents appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett? Anything else with the drainage report? Thank you, gentlemen. With that, we'll move on to number 10, report of drainage board recommendations with large drainage projects. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you. I'm Melissa Kennedy with HNTB. I have here with me today also Michael Herzick, who's one of our senior hydraulic engineers, who will be also available to answer questions as I go through the presentation if I'm not able to. So this presentation was developed based on a previous request from the Drainage Board here back in October to evaluate some potential regional projects that could be applicable to getting funding from the $1.2 billion that's coming from the state. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the statewide watershed initiative of which this money is coming out of, and then talk about the three main projects that we evaluated per your request. One was the Marvin Road levee system by itself, and then in combination with Highway 22. Two, we looked at a couple Bayou Manchac alternatives, and then we also looked at some alternatives on the Bayou Conway Panama Canal. So the statewide watershed initiative was developed, and they're going to be getting $1.2 billion. It's going to be distributed throughout the state for various flood control projects. The money is coming through HUD. It's coming down through HUD down to Office of Community Development. HUD has not come out with their rules yet. They're supposed to come out with the rules this month. And again, that's going to be through Office of Community Development, overseen by Pat Forbes, who's actually in the audience today. So if you have questions on status of that, you can ask him after the presentation. But as far as I know, the rules haven't come out yet. But once the rules come out, then OCD will need to come up with a plan on how they're going to implement those rules. They anticipate that being done and then approval of the funding coming through in about March. Now, the money, the way they're going to allocate the money is going to be technically in batches. However, specifically how that's going to be done hasn't been determined, but the first set of projects that they're going to allocate it to would be those projects that are pretty much ready to go and that also do no harm, meaning they will not have any impacts upstream, downstream to the neighbors of those projects, such as a detention pond. Then they'll be giving projects in what I call phase 2 allocations, those projects that may require a little bit more detailed analysis. Again, not sure if that will be one set of projects that they'll evaluate or there'll be multiple sets of projects evaluated as far as how the money is going to be distributed. In addition, we've been told that the money can also be used to pay for the local share of those projects that are hazard mitigation grant applications. So the parish has a couple projects out there for those, so their local share potentially could be paid for with that money. The other thing that OCD is going to be looking at are these regional projects, cross-jurisdictional boundaries. That hasn't been totally clearly defined. It could be maybe between different parishes, different municipalities within the parish, such as in here, Sorrento, Gonzales, or parish, etc. And again, it has to have the support of adjacent jurisdictions that are impacted. And then last, there has to be a positive benefit cost ratio. In terms of how they're going to evaluate that, it hasn't come out yet, but we've been told it may be similar to the benefit cost ratio analysis completed for HMGP applications. So next, I just wanted to give obviously you've seen this numerous times. This is the FEMA flood map, current FEMA flood map, and in blue shows the extent of the 100-year floodplain, and the other area are areas of less flood risk. So again, the whole point of that is you can see that much of the parish is in the 100-year floodplain. So when the parish asked us to evaluate some projects, we had to come up with some criteria on how we were going to do that. So we decided to use a 100-year event as our basic level of protection for consistency in evaluating the different projects. We wanted to achieve some water surface elevation reductions from the projects. Again, regional benefit, whether it would be multiple parishes, multiple governmental entities. We needed to determine the cost and then evaluate from a very high level some of the benefits of those projects. And then assess the environmental impacts, and again, evaluate and minimize impacts to or from other projects. So the first one we looked at, and you've seen this before, is the Marvin Road levee system. We looked at the Marvin Road levee system by itself, which is the west levee, the north levee, and the lower ridge levee, raising those to a 100-year level of protection, and then improvements to the pump station, Marvin Road pump station, and tie into those adjacent levees. That project by itself is about $55 million. However, for the 100-year, there still is some overflow over Gold Place Road that gets into the interior. So the Lower Ridge Levee Extension project will mitigate that, that inflow. So when you add the Lower Ridge Extension project to the Marvin Road West project, that's about a $24 million. So those two together total about $75 million. So the next screen I want to show you, this is a water surface elevation map. This is the existing water surface elevation of the 100-year without any of these projects in place. The next map will show you when we put all the projects in place, how that water surface elevation changes. So I just want to go back and forth. So it's a significant improvement in putting all these projects in place. You lower the water surface elevation up to 5 feet close to the Marvin Road pump station. You get less as you go out northwest of the pump station, but you still get good 3 to 4 feet reduction in water surface elevations. You will still have some overflow up in the Henderson Bayou area, but this does mitigate a lot of the flooding. The downside is this project does have negative impacts outside the levee. It does increase some water surface elevations north of Highway 22. You can see Highway 22 and Highway 16 kind of form this whole barrier and hold some of the water in. So you get an increase of about 0.4 to 0.6 feet in water surface elevations on the outside. We evaluated this previously, and when we did it, we evaluated it more recently. We were able to include the new LiDAR from CPRA. So the impacts from this project aren't as high as what we had seen previously when we evaluated it. So we had better data. So then we looked at the Highway 22 project. You've seen this one before. We came up with a couple alternatives before. One, dredging out that whole area between the levee and the Amite River Diversion Canal. It was a very expensive project, putting a brand new bridge from the levee all the way to the Amite River Diversion. Total cost of that project was around $262 million. At that time, we had looked at a smaller size project, doing some selective dredging just between the levee and the development, and then the development and the Amite River. On that project, we came up with a cost of about $62 million, but we were not able to get the same benefits that we were achieving with the full cut. So we said, can we look at it and see if we can optimize it some way? So this is what you're seeing is the optimized project. It still includes some of the two cuts on the sides, but the one on the left, the lower left, we expanded it, and we're realigning that segment of the Marvin Road North levee. And then we also then included a larger ridge area to the north. So that other gray area to the north is another cut we did with this project. So you get about 1,500 feet of relocation of the Marvin Road North levee, about 3,600 feet of new bridge, and it's still a lot of excavation, but the total cost is about $107 million. So much less than the 232 we had, though a little bit more than the 62 million. But again, this is the water surface elevation with none of the projects in place. You put them all in place and you still achieve that same interior benefit up to 5 feet of water surface elevations by the pump station and less as you go out. But what this project does, it helps to mitigate that rise in water surface elevation from the levees. So it now reduces those water surface elevations. with just the Marvin Road levee and Laurel Ridge extension in, we had an increase at Port Vincent of about 0.1 feet. You put the Highway 22 project in, and you don't have that increase anymore. And it drops the other increases down from, we had 0.4 to 0.6 down to 0.1 to 0.22. So it does a big drop in the water surface elevation. So this project altogether would benefit Ascension and Livingston. So then we move on to Bayou Manchac. Bayou Manchac, the other request was, can we look at just dredging the existing Bayou Manchac Canal to the river and pumping it over the river? So we did look at that. It requires about 2.68 million cubic yards of excavation, about 7.7 miles worth of channel digging. What we did on this one, we looked at dredging it to a -5 pretty consistently all the way to the river, a 70-foot bottom width with 3-to-1 side slopes, so it's a fairly significant channel. And we put a 3,000 CFS pump station at the river. Cost of this one is about $250 million. So this is the existing conditions water surface elevation map for this area. And when you add in the project, you can see it goes down not very much. So you have a very high cost project with not a whole lot of benefit. It does benefit the Spanish Lake area, drops water surface elevations down here about a little over 1 foot. But the main thing this project does, it results in the water's receding quicker because it's pulling the water out so people can get back into their houses quicker. But it really does not provide a lot of benefit in water surface elevation reductions. The other thing about what this project does, it also goes through the University Lakes or University Home subdivision and University Club, thank you, subdivision. And when we looked at that, it requires about 30 home acquisitions and relocations, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be unacceptable. The other thing is Bayou Manchac is designated as a historic and scenic river by the state. So all of these things that I mentioned doing, the excavating, the channel, it's not allowed by law, so there would have to be a state law passed in order to even do this project. So it really just is not a very beneficial project, and it also requires extensive mitigation. So, and I just want to show that again, the little arrow shows that it's really forcing, what you're doing is really pulling water from the Amy River through here to the river and pumping over. And you know how much water is in the Amy River, so you're never really getting that pulling down water surface elevations. So next we looked at it and said, okay, well, let's see if we can find a different route. So this one, we tried to pull water off of Bayou Manchac by going through a Spanish Lake Bluff Swamp, following the existing channels, Alligator Bayou, Bayou Broad, pulling the water down and pumping again at the Mississippi River. And again, this channel was about 70 feet bottom width, 3-to-1 side slopes. It's about a little over 7 miles. And it also requires significant over 2 million cubic yards of excavation, and again, a 3,000 CFS pump station. And what this one does, and a cost of about $244 million. What this one does is reduces water levels in Spanish Lake a little bit. Again, about 1 foot. So again, here is the existing conditions, water surface elevations, and this one is with the project. You can see it's the green color changes slightly. So again, what you're doing is you're just pulling water off really of the Amy River. You do get some reduction in Spanish Lake, but you don't get any benefit really upstream of Alligator Bayou into the areas where you really have the more populated areas. So then we looked at, we said, okay, well, instead of just following existing Bayou Manchac, what if we just dug a whole new channel? Would that do any good? And the quick answer is not really. So, again, another channel, it does not interfere with any existing homes, so we don't have those impacts. It doesn't interfere with the historic and scenic river, so there's not those impacts. But it still is a very expensive project, requires extensive mitigation, utility relocations, right-of-way acquisition, mitigation, et cetera, for $237 million. And again, this is the existing water surface elevation, same as you saw before. This one with the project in, again, you can see it reduces water surface elevations, but not very significantly. It's about the same benefit as if we were judging the existing channel. So again, and then somebody asked, well, what if we increase the pump station? Well, you can't just increase the pump station. You have to increase the channels to get the water to the pump station. So we looked at increasing the pump station to about 9,000 CFS. It requires a very large channel, and the cost goes up from about $262 million to almost $430 million. And you're still not getting the benefit because you're just now drawing more water off of AME. The only benefit you get is that you're allowing the water to recede quicker in these other channels, Bayou Fountain, by Ward Creek, and Spanish Lake Bluff Swamp. But again, very expensive costs. Again, you're forcing the river to go upstream to the pump station through areas which normally do not get this type of water. So then the last one we looked at is Bayou Conway Panama Canal watershed. Similar to Bayou Manchac, we looked at diverting or dredging from pretty much the junction of Bayou Conway Panama Canal or near there to the river and putting a pump station there. This one is not as extensive of a channel project. It's 30-foot bottom width, 3-to-1 side slopes, a -3 invert elevation, and 1,000 CFS pump station at the river. It's about 4.2 miles, 870,000 cubic yards of dredging. There is, of course, right-of-way acquisition, some crossings that will need to be replaced, and some mitigation and permitting. This project results in about, and it's a $61 million. This one results in about a foot or so of water surface elevation reductions. This is the image of the pre-project, and this one is with project. So that one you can see has some actual significant benefit, especially on the upper Conway and Panama Canal. And it does benefit both Gonzales and Ascension Parish areas. So then we looked at, well, is there another route? We looked at another route. We took a shorter route and went from that same junction point, went straight south to the river, because it's less than 2 miles long. It's not as extensive in excavation, 300 cubic yards, only like 78 acres of right-of-way acquisition. And it has some benefit. Again, this is the same existing conditions, and you'll see with the project. However, it doesn't have any benefit upstream of the diversion. So you've just lost that benefit with this project. But it still does have benefit between the diversion and up to like Boyle Bayou. So it's limited, but you get more benefits with the other project. And if you notice, we do not get any benefits downstream because you've got the big swamp area, and you're just not getting the benefit from there because it's too much water to try and get to go upstream. So then we looked at, well, what about a project at the downstream end? People have asked about, what if you pumped at Bayou Conway over Airline Highway and put in a gate structure? So we looked at that originally just by itself. It doesn't do a lot of good because you're going to get overflow of Airline Highway because there are a lot of places that Airline Highway is low. And in addition, you have Blind River that has a huge impact because it's a significant watershed. So even if you cut off that area, you're still going to have the water coming from the Blind River. So then we added a pump station and gate structure at the Blind River crossing and said, well, okay, well then let's raise the low portions of Airline Highway. It's a very significant project. We put 3,000 CFS pump stations at both locations, and then sector gates at each of these because they're navigable. So we had 24 by 20 sector gates, and then there's 2 other crossings that we also required some miter gates, so those were added in. The total project of this one's about $262 million. Again, we raised airline highway. We could also, you know, if you wanted to try and optimize, you could put maybe a flood wall along there and not have to touch the highway. So there are other things we could look at, but it's still a very high cost. And this is the existing conditions, water surface elevation, and then this is with project. So you can see the water surface elevation essentially lowers in the swamp, and that's all. So you get about a foot reduction in the swamp.
Place to help.
It's a huge area. You do not get any real benefit upstream in the populated areas. Another reason for that, though, is because there are many
All 3 miles.
restrictions in the upper channels. You've got your I-10 crossing, which is a restriction on Bayou Conway. Then you've got Highway 70, Highway 44 along Panama Canal. And then there are just some other small restrictions that are just preventing the flows to get into the swamp so that you can even pump it out. So that's an extremely expensive project for no real good benefit. So in summary, when we look at everything, we decided that the whole Marvin Road, Laurel Ridge, and Highway 22 project all combined together, we think that all those put together, it's about $186 million, would be a good project, and you probably can get the needed benefits required for that one. The Bayou Conway Panama Canal alternative dredging to the west and pumping over the river, we think that may be a viable project as well. The Manchac alternatives, we just do not think there's any viable projects. So we wanted to summarize this table. These are all the alternatives, and then those categories that were part of our criteria: the cost, water surface elevation reductions, regional benefit, flood damage reduction, environmental impacts, and then we call it adverse effects, trying to come up with a way to capture those types of things, and then which ones we recommend. So based on this chart, again, as I previously said, we believe that the Marvin Road, Laurel Ridge with Highway 22 project should be proceeded for further detailed economic analysis, as well as dredging of the Bayou Conway from the junction back to the river and pumping over. And I think that's it.
All right, any
Questions?
Questions or comments? Mr. Clore?
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I agree with you 100%. Of course, we have the Laurel Levee extension already permitted, and we're trying to find some feasible way to move forward on that. And that the Laurel Levee improvements on the existing levee, we've had that, looked at that for a long time. With those, just like you said, the Highway 22 opening is a must, okay? And it's not only for us, it's for us in Livingston. It'll probably help upriver also, because we'll let that water that gets, it's just a pocket that it comes and sit in, and there's nowhere for it to go. And I urge this board strongly to be in favor of going forward with these projects, because that's must thing. We have it's a domino effect that when we breach the Laurel Levee, even if we put the extension, when we breach that, then we roll over into the New River pumping basin, which right now we have between 6,000 to 7,000 cubic feet per second with 6 or 7 pumps. And, you know, we've had those pumps just strained out during this massive flood of August of 2016. And we ended up making a cut in our existing levee further down from the pump station, actually evacuated more water than the pump could put out anyway. So we know there's some lower land there that's not being used to evacuate down. And I think that, like I said, that would help this whole corridor from above Fort Vincent and Livingston all the way down through to Lake Maurepas. So I'd appreciate anything that you could do to move forward with those 3 projects. And you know, of course, like I said, we already have the Laurel Levee extension. I don't think any proposal that you have so far, and of course it's not detailed, you don't have any changes in what we plan on doing on Laurel Levee extension. We have some engineering that's already been done, and our administration can get with the engineers that worked on that, on the Law Ridge levee, the existing levee itself. We have some of the improvements on that. And I didn't hear a lot of detail about it, but we have some small changes, some things we can do with the Law Ridge, with the Marvinboro pump station. Now, unless I just missed it while I was gawking at the other projects in front of me, that could do more shoring up of that station itself.
Correct.
And when it did breach the Law Ridge levee and came over and came through Sanamon, it went directly to Sorrento and all the areas down there that those people are just, they're helpless. They didn't have anything, okay? So I agree with Mr. Dawson and looking strongly as we can at the Panama Conway, but anything we can do up above us and even our neighboring parish above us on anything they can do, including Livingston and East Baton Rouge Parish for sure, that'll help. And I don't see any way to stop that water from coming down Bayou Manchac. We just got to let it come down better somehow and clear out that Spanish Lake area. Thank you.
Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, first of all, thank y'all for your work on all of this. I understand y'all can't control what the models show, but is there any hope for the northern part of the parish or as drainage solutions? Because it seemed like everything we saw was extremely expensive and provided little to no benefit.
Right, and I mean, you've got AMET coming in. I mean, that is really the critical thing. The only way to really stop is to prevent AMET from coming back in. But the problem with that, you try and prevent AMET from coming in, you're now forcing that water to either go upstream or downstream, so you're going to be impacting elsewhere. We only briefly looked at Henderson previously. You've got some issues there at Henderson. It's a little low. But, Michael, do you have any other?
I apologize, but there are crossings that need to be considered. There's a lot of choke points along these waterways, whether it be private landowner crossings and timber bridges, or undersized culverts and other type of structures that do impede the water from moving faster. We looked at that a little bit on Boyle Bayou, excuse me, and Upper Conway, and there's opportunities there that need to be considered.
What about, I know you'd mentioned detention ponds, like regional detention ponds. Is something that doesn't harm everybody around it necessarily, but is that something that could provide benefit for the northern part?
Yeah, I'll let you speak to the northern part. The problem is being able to find an area large enough to be able to store that. And unfortunately, the areas, I think, are developed fairly well. I mean, we looked at, you also have the Sorrento system that just has not been really analyzed. There is a potential project there, but it needs to be analyzed still. So I don't know if there's other areas in the northern part of the parish.
There was some.
You got some in District 7.
There were some properties identified on Boyle Bayou that were possibly available for that, and that could be something that we could definitely consider in your direction. And just, for us, it would be a matter of, okay, where are the opportunities? Where are, because upstream storage is an opportunity, you're absolutely right, to detain it before it moves downstream. That's primarily going to be in the upper portions of the watersheds where it's not influenced by the backwater effect from the swamp.
Yeah, Councilman Lawler has stole all my thunder and some. I had made several notes here, but I want to review these things to be sure I understand it as well and the public at home. For years, I've got comments from the people who live in the north part in Prairieville that why don't we just redredge out that natural channel to the Mississippi River and put a pump station and do what nature was doing years ago. Sounds like your $250 million model for that says we're not going to get any WSCL benefit from its terms of reduction. The people at home keeping score, the $244 million Bayou Manchac diversion through Spanish Lake Bluff Swamp, boundary of my district with Terry's. Again, no real WSCL reduction. Let's not do that. And last but not least was a whole new channel that y'all presented, 237 million. So back to Aaron's question, he kind of sidebarred and passed me a note, and the only comment I could make to him while y'all were talking was, yeah, it looks like we can't help Prairieville at all. Or can we? So I'd captured earlier, you said, Melissa, that a lot of this money, these HUD dollars, in terms of fund allocation is, in phase one anyway, for ready, no-harm projects. It would seem to me this upstream business with regional detention ponds can be found. Now, and I'm not just saying this, you're not going to find it in District 4, I can tell you that, unless you find some property off of Swamp Road. It's about all that's left that's not developed. But, and I don't mean to be placing these things in Aaron's district or speaking for him, but I drive through there once in a while. I do see some areas in there. I'm just wondering if we couldn't, I wrote this down, can we locate some regional property where, quote, regional large-sized detention ponds such as, and I've said this before in public, being used in Houston, being used in St. Tammany effectively, where we could construct these things with an eye on future development, which, quite frankly, is going to largely be in Aaron's district, and then south of that, probably over with for me in District 4, hopefully it is anyway, you know, toward the Geismar and Santa Ma areas and so forth. So I would encourage y'all to take a look at some of this upstream business. A little maybe stronger than, maybe you haven't even done that. And I notice it's coming up on our agenda. It's going to be a question I'm going to have then. I'll lay the card at the table now. I don't see anything in the floodplain management business and the drainage impact study business we're about to consider involving regional detention ponds or any recommendations for HNTB. We do that, and I've charged you guys, but let's be really sure that, well, we totally say we can't do that, that we really, really can't. Because I think it is a potentially effective way to go, as well as in these other areas. One other way to do it, if you can't move the water away from the property, you can elevate the property in these swamped areas. And so, again, I would like to see some recommendations where we're going to continue to build. These developers, you know, they can buy this property 10 cents on the dollar. They're old cow pastures. We all know that. Young people don't want to deal with it anymore. And so they're going to come and they're going to do that. And with our current rules and regs, if we don't require the houses go up, I think it's like Mr. Graves said from that microphone, Garrett Graves, not too long ago, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when we're going to have another August 2016 great flood in Ascension Parish. Oh, and Mr. Lawler would like to know, and I would too, how many acres does it take to do one of these regional ponds? Because he knows his district really well, and maybe we could get something going there yet. I will tell you this. I've said it before, I don't want to review it, but if you just look at the shaded precincts on the east and west side banks of the Amite River, and then when it comes down to Bayou Manchac and goes towards Aaron's district and mine and Terry's, in either direction, you shade those areas. I've talked about it. Development in the census from 1990 to, 1990 to 2010 showed like 85% development in that area along the banks of those waterways, versus in the whole parish it was 30-some-odd%, and for the whole state it was only 7%. So we're still developing there. We just got to get the water away from the people who want to live on the water. Or we might have to move them up vertically. Does any of this make sense? I mean,
No, it totally does, and we
I'm
totally
not an
agree
engineer or
with you.
anything. I'm the old chicken doctor here, but
And
please send me these slides and all, because people are still asking me about, hey, we need to do what nature did. Let's just redredge. And here you're all expert, and you're saying redredging the existing channel and even putting a pumping station on the banks of Mississippi just isn't going to give us any bang for the buck. So I'm obviously not.
And results is specific to Spanish Lake. There's other areas, like you pointed out, where regional detention will be a benefit, significant benefit.
How many acres we need for a nice big regional detention pond up in Prairieville somewhere?
We'll definitely be evaluating that when that question is asked.
Maybe more than one.
And there are opportunities for that, as was identified in Boyle Bayou, where there's some properties identified, and so we need, you know.
Are we going to need that later on into our existing law, or is it just something we can do?
I don't know about the existing law, but I can say that as part of the overall proposed floodplain management plan, part of that task was to evaluate each of the watersheds individually, incorporating the new LIDAR and evaluating and getting surveys done so that we can look at those and look at other projects that would benefit the areas.
Yep. I might mention too that this is a a very non-authoritative source, Wikipedia. But if you look up Prairieville, I was fascinated years ago when there was some interest in maybe incorporating the area into a city. You know, how did it get its name? What was its roots and all that? And people would ride along Highway 73, Old Jefferson Highway, and look on each side and say, oh, look at the nice prairies. And the people wanted to come up here for a reason long before we had great schools and trying to get away from the poor schools, let's say, in Baton Rouge. And everybody talks about our areas just being South Baton Rouge transplants. We get a little offensive about that because some of us have been here, like me, for going on 3 decades. So not exactly an old timer, but I'm an old timer now. But I will say this. Wikipedia will tell you that Prairieville is 23 feet above sea level, highest spot in all of Ascension Parish.
That's it.
And I served for going on my 8th year from January. And prior to 2016, I sat on this commission and was like, until we finally flooded. And again, it was all the people in my district who live in subdivisions where the backs of them back up to Bayou Manchac. Bell Grove, my subdivision, Greenbrier, Perkins Oaks, Manchac Crossing, Manchac Plantation, St. Andrews, you name it. And for the first time, I'm like, I shared the grief with my fellow councilman who got it even harder, Mr. Kluhat and Dempsey and so forth, in the Santa Monica, Sorrento areas and so forth. So I'm all for the projects. I'm glad to see that the modeling is going to work for some of those guys. But guys, we got to do something for Prairieville now because it's going to continue to get more and more dense. Going to be more and more runoff problems in general. If the only thing we can do is regional detention ponds and/or require we put something up in the air, maybe that's what we need to really start thinking about. And I thank everyone for listening.
Mr. Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Good job. You know, I appreciate all the work that you guys have put into that. It's really a good presentation, and I like the path forward myself. Let's see, I'd written a couple of questions, like relative to the Highway 22 cut. Do you know whether all that is in Ascension? Did you look at it, Randy? Is that, I know that,
It appears to all be an Ascension. You may have some out right before you cross 22 going south.
Yeah.
Yeah, right before you cross 22, there's a small dent of Livingston that comes in, and then after you cross 22 going downriver, it wings back in, so you may have a little bit of Livingston up in there.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe
as
look
you
at that.
split it,
Yeah.
and you know, the
'Cause
smaller
the
cut.
diversion is not the boundary line.
Yeah, Bayou Piers. Yeah.
And if you don't mind, can you get me back to a slide? I kind of blinked. No, if you can't, it's no big deal. I'll look at it later.
What one did you want?
Well, I wanted to look at this Panama Conway, you know, the before and after kind of deal on the Panama Conway. Then I wanted to ask about,
This one, the dredging one, or?
That's
Yeah.
the best one
yeah,
right there, Bill.
okay, and then turn it off? I mean, okay. I wanted to ask about, oh, I lost my place here. Oh, how many structures, do you know how many structures are affected, or do you have any idea about how many structures are affected by the certification of the Marvin Bro levee?
Not off the top of our heads, no. Mm-mm.
Okay.
A
So I
lot.
wanted to, I'm not sure, I didn't quite hear it myself, but that price includes certification of all the levees in the Marvin Bro system, so that people will get credit for that on their insurance. They really won't be they'll be in a flood zone X. Is that correct? The people that live there?
I'm sorry, this will be for
For
the
Marvin Bro.
Upper Bayou.
Yeah, Marvin
No,
Bro.
Marvin Bro.
Marvin Bro. So if we get those levees certified,
Yes.
then everybody that lives within the boundaries of those or inside that protection system will be removed from the 100-year flood.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, so they'll be in a Zone X. And they will see tremendous benefits on their insurance premiums, right?
Correct.
Okay. Then, you know, I know you mentioned this about the HMGP grants, and William, did I make a mistake?
Well, I just want to interject that FEMA would have to certify all those levees, and we would also have to do something with the Marvin Bro pump station. So it would be, you know, it's a tall order to get all of them done. Can it be done? The answer is yes, but there's a lot of work to do to get all those certified. Now, right away, they would certainly get the benefits of the flood protection.
Not flooding benefit,
Yes.
but I'd like to see them get the monetary benefit too.
Right,
I mean,
and that would be something that we would have to take a look at
Okay.
over and above this.
Okay.
I didn't want, it just sounded like you made it simple, and it's not simple.
It's a daunting process, as you saw with the Lomar for the Bayou Conway Panama Canal.
Yeah,
That
well,
one, there was
I
no
thought that was
project.
yeah.
So when you add a project in, or multiple projects, it just gets more complicated in the process.
Well, I mean, I don't want to lose track of that should be something we evaluate. And then on these grants, and what I'm hearing is, and which my appreciation, I don't think Martha's here now, but that we're asking for 33 million, and with the matching, it's like about 50 million. So we've got like $17 million in matching to get these HMGP grants. Does anybody know that's is those numbers close?
No, I think those numbers are correct.
A special guest here that's going to answer.
Pat Forbes, Louisiana Office of Community Development. I don't know the exact amounts on your HM grant request, but I wanted to speak to the match issue that was brought up earlier. We have budgeted money to pay all the HMGP match from the August flood across the state. What we don't know yet, as was also alluded to in that same slide, is whether the HUD rules are going to allow us to do that. So we're still waiting for a Federal Register notice from HUD that describes the specific rules associated with the $1.2 billion grant. But we have set aside $150 million to pay the HM match across the state.
Let me get one clarification. Is that included in the 1.2 billion
Yes.
that's coming to us, or is that included in the restore? No?
It's included in 1.2 billion that's coming to us.
That's coming, okay.
Right.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Okay, so I guess all I'm saying there is, you know, maybe it wasn't as certain as I thought it was, but, you know, I think we should include that request in, you know, if we move forward. Of course, it's up to the entire commission, but certainly if we qualify for that, it'd be a good place to get the matching.
Bless you.
One more time.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Pam, I'm just, I'm glad about the result of all of it, Panama Conway and the Marvin Bro system, and I understand the guys that are up there in Prairie View that are, you know, but anyway, I'm all in favor of moving forward with this, with you know, what your recommendations are, and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooley.
Yeah, real quick, I want to reflect back on what you talked about on the certifications of the levies.
You want to take my pump away?
No. I don't want to take anything away from anybody. We should have, within the drainage department, should have some preliminary work already done on the levy certification, the existing levy certifications and the possible work that we had. We've got one engineering firm that's here tonight, but I mean, but we've already got some work, some preliminary work done on that. And we know the hurdles that we got to go through to do it. We know that we got some physical work that has to be done before that's done. And, but there's already some taxpayer money spent and there's some preliminary work being done on that. So somebody should be able to work with you within a decent amount of time and give you a number that what's this going to take. And I don't disagree with that being part of the challenge, because I guess my first goal is to keep people from flooding. Then we talk about fighting with FEMA over whether they're gonna sprinkle holy water on our levees, and that's about what it ends up being. And just a quick second, if I could still have the floor,
Sure.
Mr. Chair, is to reflect back on what Mr. Sadley said, and thank you for your sympathy, sir. We, we've been around here forever. We know that Prairieville proper is pretty elevated area. The whole bluff area. Before the Mississippi River was ever there. So I got a historic question to ask you guys. You play with water all the time. Did Bayou Manchac flow into the Mississippi River?
At one time.
At one time, okay, so we cleared that up.
Sorry.
Did it
It went both ways.
That's what I want to clear up. Is that in the spring, when Holland Road and the Bluff became the levee, before the levee was ever there, I'm sure that Bayou Manchac flowed in our direction. So it came up and down, and it
Yes,
flowed in both
goes up and
directions.
down, yes.
All right, so, I just want to clear up that it didn't always just flow toward the Mississippi River.
No,
And it's a daunting task to get it to flow to the Mississippi River right now.
correct.
All right. So, while Doc was talking about, regional detention, y'all never did allude to even throwing out an acreage of what is a decent regional detention. So, and that might not even be a feasible question for you to answer tonight. So I'm gonna give you some latitude on that. So is it 50 acres? Is it 5?
It depends
Is
on the
it
size of the
500?
watershed that you're
Right.
trying to.
There you go.
Protect.
Great answer.
Smaller watershed, smaller detention, bigger one.
That's a great answer because currently, with the development in the north end of the parish, from the ridge and extending past the ridge and the total north end of the parish, coveting Manchac, all the way, basically developing from Port Vincent all the way along Manchac, all the way to the Iberville line, with all that doing, the people above us have been doing major drainage improvements with concrete runways for a long time. We've tried to bring some of those folks to the table probably within the last 10 years. Very unsuccessful with it. One thing I do know where the detention pond is. I live in it, okay? All right? So if you want to know where it's at, Google 12038 Arthur Cluart Road, okay? Sanamon, 70774. That's where the regional detention pond is, down in the south end right now, okay? So I agree with Doc and Aaron that basically looking at some detention to slow some water down, but I do not want to underscore the importance of the Law Ridge levee improvements, Law Ridge levee extension, and the debottlenecking of the cuts in Highway 22. That I think that we're going to improve both sides of the Amite River right there in that area and reduce, even if we have an overtop of a different type of event, and we have a time frame for water to go down rather than just all gush over. And so it even gives the Marvinboro pump station time to pump down. It gives, doesn't flood Panama Conway, so it's domino effect. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, one of the things that I would like to see us concentrate on as well, if we start working with our local deputy to look at this state law about Bayou Manchac being on a historic river. That there's a lot of work that needs to be done along that's being prohibited, de-snagging and everything else. And I think that's something we need to address. A question for you guys. Did you look at, with your pumping stations for Conway or Manchac, did you look at reversing that and putting a pump at the site and piping it to the river? And as far as if that would be a little bit more cost effective?
We considered that, and when we looked at it in terms of logistics of having to water hammers and shut-off valves and the, as we pointed out, the length of it really became sort of prohibitive. And the dredge and open cut seemed the most efficient and cost-effective way.
Because I know with a 31 on slope right now, we're having a lot of issues and everything on the channels that we have. So your channels on a 3-to-1 slope, moving that much water through them, you're going to have a lot of issues with that, I would believe.
Yeah, and part of the reason why we had such large channels is we're trying to keep a 2 foot per second velocity through there, such that we, possibly would have a more stable channel configuration, then also make sure that the water got to the station. But if you're saying that 3-on-1 is too optimistic, then 4-1 needs to be considered. Those types of details will be worked out as if we look deeper into these channel configurations.
I think and I'm not sure how in depth did you get as far as I know you picked out a lot of bottlenecks on some major channels, but as far as like offshoots on that roadside ditches and different things like that, how in depth did you go as far as looking at those bottlenecks and things that we have in other areas?
We really focused on the main stem, such that like Bayou Conway or Panama Canal or up in Manchac and Muddy Creeks. But we looked at the main stem for those types of tributaries.
Okay. And Mr. Clue, and then everybody covered as far as some of the regional retention. I think those are some other things that throughout the system, if you don't have the large bodies of land that you're talking about in some areas, you may do multiple retentions in different areas to accommodate the same thing, where you do have pieces of property that you can go throughout the system. For example, along Black Bayou, you may not be able to do it more in the northern end, but somewhere between the northern and the middle end towards it, you can do smaller projects along those. So I would encourage that to be looked at as well, to maybe break that up to where different areas are looked at as far as retention is concerned.
Understood.
Thank you.
Mr. Todd.
Yeah, Ryan, maybe even GSA might can answer this. I always said our levees, as far as the height of our levees, were not at a 100-year flood. And I keep hearing them. Heard y'all talk about the 100-year flood for the Law Ridge levee extension, but as of right now, they're not at a 100-year flood as far as the height of the levees, even with an extension where it hits Highway 431. Could you give me what that flood? Is it a 50-year flood or is it a 25-year flood?
Right.
Okay.
The existing levees, we talked about raising them up to bring them up to the 100-year. And that in combination with the proposed Law Ridge.
But you would have to raise Highway 22 also in order to.
There might be
because you're already at the top of 22 almost right now. And if you got to go higher, you would have to.
And then when we put in the Highway 22 project, that would be taken into consideration.
Because I thought the levees were always less per year.
They are.
In the past.
They are.
And I've been hearing.
The project includes a slight elevation in 22 as you get to that area. It stays high to the diversion canal.
Just making sure. Thank you.
You had anything, Johnny? You had anything? Mr. Terry?
Just one comment. I thank you all very much for your work. I know that this was a lot of research on your part, and we appreciate it. I'm very disappointed, of course, that we can't affect a difference in North Ascension, but I do want to remind people the largest single retention area in North Ascension is Spanish Lake and Bluff Swamp. That is what they were and are naturally. And so in our private discussions, all of you and me, we've discussed that we cannot dam off at Bayou Manchac and Alligator Bayou and Fish Bayou and Frog Bayou because of the cooperative regional issues that are happening there. So if you would just elaborate on that just a little bit for the benefit of the folks who live in that area, who live in the largest retention area in the
Sure,
region.
and I did mean to mention that before, and I failed. Yeah, we talked about if we were to raise Manchac Road or dam it off or put something there, then you're preventing the water that naturally is trying to get into Spanish Lake and causing upstream rise in water surface elevation, not only in EBR, but upstream in Ascension in the Bayou Manchac watershed. So that is going to be a detriment to you if you were to do that.
Thank you.
Real quick, with all these proposals, either Manchac reversing the flow to the river, you get it and you pump it to the river.
Mm-hmm.
Do you pump it over the levee?
Yes.
Okay, is there a way to penetrate the levee?
The Corps does not like you to do that. So you're going to have to go over.
Corps would never let you do
No.
that.
Don't do it, John,
No.
please.
And even doing that will be a significant challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Large enough pipes and all that.
Okay, with that, Past President, you have anything to add to, this report, or Mr. Daniel?
No, other than, all of these big projects fringe on that $1.2 billion, you know, because we don't have 262 million and 120 million and all that. So I think everybody knows that, but we still don't have the rules for applying for the money yet. But, you know, and they talked about doing projects together. We talked to Graves about doing projects with Livingston and East Baton Rouge. So all of that's fringing on what the rules are going to be to get that 1.2 billion or 1.4 billion. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out, and I think they said it, but the Highway 22 project effectively mitigates all of the water that Livingston had previously discussed, you know, being there. They actually have new LiDAR data that shows it's only 1/10 of a foot even building the Laurel Ridge levee.
Without the 22.
Without the
improvement.
Highway 22. So
Thank
it's
you for
all, it's
clearing
very,
that up,
it's
sir.
very insignificant now, but with the Highway 22 project, that really benefits Livingston Parish tremendously.
Very much.
And that's a good project. So, you know, we want to look at the regional projects. I think what direction we would like from the Drainage Board is they made recommendations on the projects, and we just like some sort of recommendation from y'all that to go forward with those projects that they recommended.
So moved.
Second.
You made a motion or second?
If that's,
I made the motion.
if that's the motion, I second it, and I have discussion.
Discussion.
You want to recognize the parish president?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Fred.
I'll yield.
I think we should wait a little while because on the Corps is doing hydraulic study of the Hohe Mead Basin, and it's going to be finished in March. So at that time, that's going to give us a lot more hydraulics in that area.
Okay.
You-
Real quick,
Let's go up, finish up.
yeah, and I'm only be a little bit. We have two other projects that wasn't talked about tonight. One of them, we have a project that we have a joint venture with Livingston Parish, is rehabilitation of the weir, okay, on the diversion canal. We feel like that right now, according to engineers, instead of 70% going down the Amite River, 30% down the diversion, now we got 70% coming down the diversion canal and only 30%. That still has to take place. We've got another project that we've talked to when we met with Livingston and Ascension together just a short while ago in the River Committee, the River Basin Committee, that the dredging of the Amite River. So I hadn't seen anything on that, but that's something that's got to take place. We've got to have somewhere for this water to go. The place is silted in, and if available, Mr. Chairman, I would like, looking at these we squeezed on these time frames, and that's what's been told to us from day one when this 1.2 billion came into effect. So we rushed to get. I would request that if you allow Pat Forbes to come forward and let us, just Pat, I know you don't have a date that you can throw down right now, but kind of give us what we're looking like.
Thank you, sir.
Before we got to get our stuff together and move forward.
One is that the information you looked at earlier is our understanding as well, that we hope to get the Federal Register notice sometime around year end, either right before January 1 or right after January 1. The other important time aspect is our Amite River Basin model that we're almost through with, that's going to allow you then to look at the entire basin, because usually detention is a lot more useful and cost effective when it's further up in the watershed. And so what we tell people all over the state is sometimes the most effective flood risk reduction project for you is going to be built in another parish.
Right.
And so, as you think through projects to do, it's not just projects that are in Ascension Parish that you would consider, but projects across the basin and what the overall impact is on not only you, but all your neighbors within that basin. So that's really the heart of the watershed initiative approach, is that you'd be expected to work with everybody else in the watershed to establish what the most cost-effective and effective projects are for everybody.
So when do you expect that Amite River?
So it is practically done. I think the absolute final version will be out by March, but we're going to start being able to share information before that. So it's a fairly short time frame to be done with that.
Mr. Bill,
and real quick, the Comite diversion, that's another thing that we haven't talked about tonight, but that's another project that we feel, based on old numbers for sure, that'll knock 6 inches off at Fort Vincent. You know,
not my area of expertise, but I have heard Secretary Wilson talk about it enough to say that it's moving forward. They are already working on the Highway 61 crossings and all the other crossings. The funding, of course, is all there now. And and they have talked about ways to decrease the permitting time as well, so that they're trying to have construction up and running and done in a shorter period. I don't want to say a time because I don't know. I'm not an expert, but much shorter than what had previously been talked about.
Thank you, sir.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Dawson, you want to clear up? Well,
I just had a question. I don't know whether HNTB or Mr. Ford, but on this model that the Corps is doing, that's a publicly available model. Am I not correct? This HEC, whatever they call it, HEC something model. Is that something you guys can flange up to?
Oh, we've given them all the modeling that we've done already on the Amite River. We've shared that with the Corps. So that is their basis for starting and using as an evaluation. And yes, once it's done, it should be technically publicly available.
Publicly available, and you could put your inputs into it, or we could calibrate based
Well,
on the work
in
that
addition, as Mr. Forbes alluded to, the state is also working on an overall Amite River model. We've been in collaboration with them on data sharing. So when their model comes out, their whole intent is to make that publicly available kind of on a check-in, check-out basis, so people can use that model to evaluate other projects or smaller projects, et cetera. And then once a project technically is constructed and the model's been revised, and that would go back in so that the model is always being updated. So the state is working on that whole process, and he's right, the model's supposed to be done by the end of this year, but not publicly available until later in the spring. But I think for some of us who have been coordinating with them, we may be able to get it sooner.
So do you see a problem with us, going forward with the evaluation, and then when the model is available, then we can use that as calibration tool? Is that?
We intend to take, again, when we did the model, we gave them what we did as well. So everyone's kind of been sharing the data, and the intent would be then their model will be more updated than the one we've done, because they will have then incorporated all the new LiDAR data. So their model will be the most recent, and our intent would be to use theirs as the starting point for going further.
Now, what about Panama Conway? That's not included in that.
No.
That's the model that you guys have
That's
uniquely. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Sadler.
Yeah, I sort of agree with President Batassa's comment about we may want to at least consider holding off a little bit here, but maybe for a slightly different reason. In Melissa's presentation, we all saw moments ago that the two phases, phase one, which was labeled no harm projects, and she gave the specific example of detention ponds, and our discussion then with Mr. Law and myself of Peeville, after we learned that there was no real WSEL reductions from, building diversions and putting pumps on the Mississippi River. The concept of regional detention ponds, I still think looms large until we get a definite no or yes answer to it. So I'd like to see, unless there's some real big, we're jammed up for time here, we don't want to lose any money, but we want to go for as much of that HUD money as we can. Inclusion of regional detention pond engineering somewhere in Peeville. I even, in the sidebar, told my colleague to my left, and I didn't even think until Terry spoke, so her district as well, both D7 and D8, might be areas where we could do some of that yet. And until we explore that, I'm a little bit reluctant, unless you tell me we can come add these projects still on after. If I understood correctly, Melissa, and you said that you were going to actually look into that now and see whether we can do something. I mean, we can't. We pretty much agreed we can't move the water out of there any faster with these big mega hundreds of $1 million fixes, but we might be able to for the people who flooded in our areas.
I agree that, regional storage and also improved conveyance in the waterways. There are a lot of obstructions.
How long will it take for you guys to figure out not only the acreage that Randy and Aaron's asked for and myself, and even if we find out then the locations and so forth, to put a number on it and so forth and so on? How long will that take, sir?
I don't know, that's your.
Okay. A similar exercise in terms of the planning level that we performed for these three other studies, you're looking at 4 weeks.
So is that, Mr. Chairman, a time issue for us then relative to passing this resolution tonight? We have on the floor a motion in a second.
Well,
look, I take a friendly amendment to add that to it.
Well, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment, but I appreciate Bill's offer. If you're asking for an amended motion, Mr. Chairman,
I'll take an unfriendly amendment.
It's not friendly or non-friendly, but that's okay. You didn't make the parliamentary thing there, so you missed that.
Anyway,
I'll make that as a form of
You didn't make the
amendment.
class?
Maybe Mr. Lawler would.
Oh, I'll second that.
So
Okay.
with the, everything is based on a timeline here, but like I said, without the reports,
4 weeks, though, they could get this information.
Without what?
Without the Amite River basin reports, it's really whatever you want to do with it.
Well, I'm worried about, I let Mr. Gluad go.
I'm gonna ask this commission not to delay. Let's go forward with this tonight. These people got more work than they can put in front of us any dang way, okay? That's bottom line. What we got is we got basis for these major projects, and we got based on cubic yards, units, and everything. And we're looking at for Laurie's Levee extension, Laurie's Levee improvements, and the Highway 22 cut. We're looking at $186 million. Look, we moved forward over a month ago, 2 months ago. In a matter of minutes, that we had to jump hoops, get somebody on board, get forward. We were hearing all the way from Washington, D.C., through Baton Rouge, down to Ascension Parish, from everybody representing us, that we got to get on board quick. Well, we got on board quick, okay? So I want to move. I don't have a problem adding. I'm asking this, let's move, let's authorize moving forward to continue looking at these projects.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Mr. Slafford.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page here, Randy. I'm not sure, but.
We are, Doc.
What I picked up, though, I want to reiterate, is that phase one, no HUD projects might be smiled upon quicker than anything else. And the regional detention pond would qualify under that, pick that up. So it would seem to me, if we could do this in 4 weeks, we want to be sure, and it might be a small cost too, but we want to be sure that we put the foot forward that says we want as many of these dollars in Ascension, or all the other councils are going to do the same thing, as we possibly can get to make the most impact in all areas, Prairieville included. And I concede that it's not a major issue. And when I say that, for all the people that are watching at home right now, this house went underwater in Prairieville, I apologize. But as much as others, I've already said that. But I'd like to see you guys come back. I've asked for this before, and tell us about regional detention ponds. I keep reading in the internet and other places that Houston and St. Tammany and so forth are using this technology very effectively, and I'm wondering why we can't have it here in Ascension Parish. And I don't mean to use Randy's area as the detention pond.
I just want to remind you that the northern area is very influenced by the Amite River, and so much of your flooding is backflow from the Amite River. So trying to prevent that or deal with that is very complicated. It's a large amount of water. If you're talking about a smaller project from a rain event, yes, we can address that in a smaller.
Can that be funded through this program?
I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if
'Cause I may
that
have
qualifies as
misunderstood.
regional.
I thought you said no harm projects, including detention ponds,
Right.
would be something.
But I
they
don't
would-
know if it will qualify as regional. So there's that aspect to it. I can't say no or yes, I don't know the rules, so.
Well, both of y'all have indicated that the rules haven't come out yet
Right.
in the Federal Register, so we wait to see
Correct.
that.
And look, just to help keep the record clear, because I think the secretary is confused after all the different conversations, whenever y'all make the motion, can y'all actually clarify what are y'all motioning to go forward with?
It's a substitute motion. We'll do.
It's an amended motion, it wasn't a substitute, and it's been
Well, it
seconded,
can be
so
a substitute.
but I made it as an amendment, so it's on the table, but I mean, I'm not sure.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I may wanna
y'all are
withdraw the
motioning, y'all are
motion.
amending it, but I don't think anybody ever
If I'm
really
being told up
clarified
here-
what the initial motion was, and I guess
Do
that's
you
what I'm
want-
asking for.
And I somewhat agree with you. Do you want someone to express the
Yeah.
motion that they made?
Yeah, so either-
verbally?
Correct, or
Well,
if
I
y'all
didn't-
want to just
I
put
didn't
a,
make it. All I did was
Sure.
second the first one, but I think the motion from Mr. Dawson was to move forward with the recommendations of HMTB on the projects that they feel are feasible.
And I just
Right.
like to, if I could clarify that, we're not talking about doing all the engineering for the projects. We're talking about just getting these projects ready to apply for when
That's
the
it.
rules come out for the $1.2 billion of HUD money. If we get accepted for the projects, then we will come back and select engineers and do all of that.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I think Mr.
We had an amendment.
Mr.
And that
Sadler's-
amendment was seconded to add evaluation of the retention pond
Retention
in
pond.
North
Would you,
Ascension.
Mr. Dawson, would you want to tack that on to your original motion?
Well, Doc is right, I hate to say
It's-
that, but
it's-
you
it's
have to
already-
you have to make an amendment to the motion. I wanted to try to do it expeditiously, but
all right, so we got an amended motion on the table. Did somebody second it?
Yes.
Okay, so y'all ready to vote on that?
Yeah.
Deborah, you got it? You clear on what they
Discussion.
voted on?
Deborah, you
Okay.
got it or what? Bill made the first one, I seconded.
Doc
Doc
the
made an
amendment.
amendment and Aaron
And
seconded.
then Aaron seconded. All right, we back to the original.
No, do the amendment.
Let's do the
Let's do the
amendment
amendment
first.
first.
Mr. Roll call, Ms. Devon.
See if they got opposition.
Daniel Satterley,
Yes.
Randy Quinlan,
Yes,
Aaron Lawler,
Yes.
Terry Cath,
Yes.
Todd Lambert,
Yes.
John Cagnolati,
Yes.
Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Dawson,
Yes.
Yes. Now the,
original motion dead.
we good.
What you do about
With that being said, thanks for all the information, and this has been a quick and I hope it all works out. Appreciate that. All right, we're gonna move on to number 11, Mr. Jerome Fournier, Planning of Development. They have the LSU here also.
Yes, sir, I'm just going to make the presentation.
Sure, go
myself. Yeah, and I'll be quick. We've been approached by LSU's Coastal Sustainability Studio, which has a $3 million grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the National Science Foundation to do studies along the Amite River Basin. And with administration's approval, we approached them, presented about 5 projects that might be appropriate for us, and we decided on one project that we thought would be most appropriate, and that's to look at our fill ordinance and look at this from a national, statewide, regional basis. What are other places doing for fill? Is 3 feet the right number? That question's been coming up quite a bit. Is it 1 foot? Is it no feet? Is it 5 feet? We don't know the answer to that question right now. So what we'd like to do is have them do a deep dive into the floodplain ordinance as it's being presented right now. I spoke with them today, and they're getting ready to start in January with the upcoming semester at LSU because they have some graduate students who will be working on this for us. And so we're hoping to get something in the springtime from them, an answer to these questions. So that's what, and I have the proposal, I think I sent that to you in the form of a staff report. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Any questions?
One quick question.
Basically, this recommendations?
No matching funds?
No matching funds.
No.
No,
I
this
make
is
that
all,
motion.
this is all
Todd,
gross,
second by Mr.
basically.
Johnny. Discussion? Any opposition? None? Motion
you.
passed.
Great.
Mr. Jerome, again, the Restore of Louisiana presentation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I have with us tonight Jennifer Perkins and Pat Forbes from the Restore program from the state of Louisiana. And I also have Marcy Shivers here, who is our certified floodplain manager, and to answer any questions specific to Ascension Parish. But I'd like to introduce Ms. Perkins and Mr. Forbes. And John, if you could cue up the PowerPoint, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Pat Forbes, Executive Director, Louisiana Office of Community Development, and Jennifer Perkins with the Restore Louisiana program. I'm going to go through the first several slides of this pretty quick because it's basically historical about who was eligible for the program and how we phased people in and that kind of thing. If you have questions, by all means, please stop us and we can stop and explain it. But this is the overall budget for Restore Louisiana, $1.7 billion. 1.3 of that right now is allocated to the homeowner program. The other amounts, you can see one thing that we did was match for your FEMA public assistance all over the state. But in addition to that, some other programs, rental housing, affordable rental housing programs, business and agriculture enhancement, all coming up to the 1.7 billion. And in all likely, not in all likelihood, certainly the $1.3 billion that is currently allocated to the homeowner program, not all of that money will be required. How much of it will be required depends on SBA determination by HUD, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. Eligibility requirements, basically a homeowner program had to own it and live there as your primary residence at the time of the flood. We had phases over which we brought people in so that we could handle people in a reasonable period of time after they applied. These were some of the criteria. We have three solutions. One is when our program contractor builds the house for you or does the renovation for you. We've got about 15 to 20% of the people who choose that. Most people choose solution 2, which is they want to use their own contractor, do their own work, and get it done. Either way works for us. We've just found in previous disasters that lots of folks get to the end and they really don't have the wherewithal to get the project done, and so we knew that we needed a solution 1, which is where our contractors go just take care of everything. The homeowner doesn't have to sign a contract or anything. Solution 3 is reimbursement, and of course most grants that we have are some combination of 1 and 3 or 2 and 3, because almost everybody had some work done. So we reimburse for what they had done and then pay for the prospective work going forward. This is kind of the process. We expect by the end of this month, end of this year, to be through this step 6 for everybody, potential award determination. We will have that calculated. Damage assessments are going to be completed by the end of this week for the most part, so that we can accomplish that. We go out, we essentially, one lesson that we've learned from other disasters is that people are never able to get all their receipts together when they've been working on their house, and it ultimately results in underfunding people's recovery, and a lot of people can't come up with any receipts. So what we convinced HUD to allow us to do is go do an exactimate estimate. It's a software program that insurance adjusters use. Do an exactimate estimate of the amount of damage that was done, and then how much work they had done to fix it up to then, and how much is left to do, and we just calculate the grant from that without the need for any receipts. We have currently a deadline from HUD to not be able to reimburse based on those estimates past estimates that are done after the end of December 31st. So that's why we're in a hard push right now to get them all done, and we are on track to do that. Whenever we calculate how much somebody's grant is going to be, we start with that estimated cost of repair. And let's say that's $70,000 for a house. We'll go in, do the exact estimate, see that they've got $70,000 worth of damage to their home and that it's going to cost that much in our program to put them back together. What we then have to do is look at other sources of funds that they might have gotten to complete those repairs. In FEMA individual assistance, which you're probably familiar with, people could get up to $33,000, but only a part of that was for construction normally, for repairs to the home. And so that's the only part that we have to count, but we have to count that. Let's just say that's $10,000 on this theoretical homeowners grant. They got $10,000 from FEMA for repairs. If they got flood insurance, that is a duplication of benefits. We have to subtract that from our grant. Right now, if they got an SBA loan, even if they didn't draw the funds, the full approved amount of the SBA loan is what we have to currently count as duplication of benefits. Well, our congressional delegation, led by Congressman Graves in Richmond, Senator Cassidy, got some language in the FAA bill that, to us at least, and to the governor, quite clearly says a loan is not a grant, it's not a duplication of benefits. Be that as it may, we still have to wait for HUD's interpretation of that law and get the guidance from them so that we can move forward with eliminating the SBA as a duplication of benefits. We don't know what that outcome's going to be right now. We're still waiting and could be waiting some time before we get that guidance. But we have the chance out there, by virtue of this legislative language, that we're going to be able to ignore the SBA loans. We'll never be able to ignore the flood insurance or the FEMA individual assistance. And frankly, the FEMA individual assistance is one of the biggest roadblocks that we have to people's recovery, because we have to count it, and they've got to have it on hand for us to go do the project. And so we've got people who can't come up with that money. They had to buy a new car to get to work. They had to pay rent, buy food, what have you, and they don't have the funds anymore. And so we're looking at, we were just talking about this before the meeting, every way possible to try to help folks get that money, by loan, by layaway plan, you name it. We're looking at every possible opportunity to help folks get over that hurdle, but it's still a hurdle. And I think there's another. Yeah, so on the SBA duplication of benefits, the governor sent a letter requesting clarification on this because we have been waiting a long time for it. The federal legislation passed on October 3rd. It was signed by the president on October 5th. The governor sent in a request for a waiver within an hour of the thing being signed into law. He has requested an update on where we are in this waiver request. And the word that we are getting from Congressman Graves and Senator Cassidy's offices is that we should hear something on the waiver before the end of this year, but that's not the same thing as the HUD interpretation and guidance. That could be longer. It would likely will be longer than that. So unfortunately, we are still at a spot where we can't go further. But we have done, I will assure you, we have done every possible thing we can to be ready to hit a button when they tell us what the rules are. So we've engineered the software for the various different possibilities, and we have developed the information for the homeowners. We're prepared to go as prepared as we can be for when we get that guidance from HUD. But until we get to that point, we have to sit where we are. Have I left anything out, Jennifer? Okay. Okay, so that's the extent, I think that's the end of the presentation. Oh, no. Good, okay, grant calculation. So basically, this is what I was talking through. We do an estimated cost of repair, and then we subtract duplication of benefits and then come up with the award. And that is federal law. We are required by law to do that. We have offered over $530 million in grants to people across the state so far. That's over 15,000 applicants who have gotten a letter saying, here's your grant amount. We have done, at this point, I want to say innumerable outreach events where we go out and talk to folks and make sure that they understand the program and what their potential eligibility is. We have a thing that we have just opened up called Solution 4. And what that is a buyout program. Buyout programs are really expensive. We were holding it until we knew we would have enough money to do everybody else and buyouts. We know we've got that available to us now. We have sent out letters to everybody in our database who are in our system, and we have them pegged as being either in a floodway or in one of two communities in the state that we have picked out as high hazard communities. One of those is Silverleaf here in Ascension Parish. So on those two communities, we're teaming with USDA and their Natural Resource Conservation Service to do buyout of the whole thing, and they'll turn it into a wetland, which not only gets those folks out of harm's way, but also reduces flood risk for the neighbors because it's additional storage for water where that storage didn't used to exist. Officially launched December 3rd, and we're accepting applications. We've got I think it's 450 families across the state that are eligible for this. And we have lots of ways to get in touch with us. Our telephone. I'm sorry.
Lots of resources on the website.
Yeah, and lots of resources on the website if you have questions. I skipped over, I made some notes about the things I wanted to make sure I talked about on the watershed initiative, but I think I've covered them all up here earlier. But if any of you have any additional questions on that, glad to take those or any other topic.
Mr. Cooley?
Yeah, Pat, thank y'all for coming.
Yes, sir.
Real quick, I guess parish president, it's probably been close to a year ago, this flood happened here in both March and August, but in main one in August 2016. Probably at least a year ago, in my area, District 6, we had some folks in a subdivision that came forward as a small group, and then some other ones about buying them out. And if y'all remember that, and we had no legal recourse for it. I think Garrett might have worked on it a little bit. You guys were challenged with it, and we didn't have Solution 4 in front of us. But since then, they've been their paths have been segregated. Some have rebuilt, some sold and moved out. Somebody else bought the lot. So I don't think they have the group as they were before. But so you still have the individual.
Yes, sir.
The individual buyout.
We do.
Still there within. Just explain, because we may have, certain people in places that not a group, not a whole subdivision, or not a whole little area, community, village, whatever, but individuals that would want the buyout. So Solution 4 is still there for them, right?
That 450 number I gave you is the people who are in floodways.
Right.
Not to be confused with the 100-year floodplain. It is in FEMA's map. It's in a place where water at velocity is expected to be flowing through the place. So that's how we identified the 450, because federal regulations also prohibit us from spending any money to help them rebuild. We cannot spend money in the floodway, so the answer is to offer the buyout program for structures within the floodway. So that's how we arrived at that population.
I would think some normal communities, I know Livingston has some along the Amite River, they're right there in a floodway.
We've looked at a map, and they are literally scattered all over the state. Tangipahoa has a bunch. I do not remember how many were in Ascension, but there were some.
Yeah. I just wanted to clear that up, because since Solution 4 had came to the forefront, that I've had some people contact me that, they're in a flood plain, but they're not in a floodway.
Right. Jennifer tells me there's one household in Ascension Parish that's in the floodway. And then, of course, we're also offering the 50-something families in Silverleaf buyouts there.
Thank you.
Mr. Dawson.
Mr. Forbes, so while you were talking about the floodways, we possibly we have a revision to a FEMA map. So, probably some of the Panama Conway area, and we have some of these floodways have been identified. So will this program be, I think we're looking at, I'm looking at Jerome, Melissa, 6 or 8 months before FEMA approves that, or 6 months?
I think it's absolutely
still be available then?
Reasonable for us to talk about that on a case-by-case basis. Our funding has to be spent in 6 years, but we won't have the program closed down in 6 months. And if something changed on a flood map that would put somebody in a floodway, we'd absolutely want to look at whether we could accomplish a buyout there.
Okay. So I've got some people in my district, and they came to the parish, and they were substantially damaged. They came to the parish and they said, we're going to rebuild our home, and so they said, well, you got to build to this elevation, which is what our building restrictions are, is 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So they go and they build to that, and then now they come and they go to restore, and they look and they're trying to get some type of reimbursement. And now they're being told that they should have been 2 feet above the base flood elevation. This is the first, honestly, I don't know if other people on this council, maybe I didn't, maybe I had my earplugs in, but I never heard it before. And now all of a sudden, we're starting to see that, and quite honestly, it's a problem.
It's a federal regulation that it's a requirement from HUD that our funds can't be spent for something that's below 2 feet above the base flood elevation. It's been in our program policies and procedures from the beginning. Unfortunately, a lot of people who were pioneers and jumped out and had funds available went rebuilt according to parish guidelines, requirements, and that was 1 foot instead of 2 feet. We have options that we can help people with. We can still pay for the elevation of their home.
So you'd pay to elevate a house on a slab?
I'm sorry?
You'd pay to elevate a house on the slab?
If they want to do Solution 2, which is with their own contractors, they can do that. We don't do.
You pay all of that cost to elevate a house on the slab?
Yes, sir. We've got a cap on the program, but.
What's the cap?
200 total? I'm not.
No, it's actually cost per square foot, so.
Okay.
It's,
Okay. So this requirement, this 2 foot requirement has been around for a long time. It's just, I guess it never made its way down to us. Or how is that people notified of that, or was, when the flood, after the flood happened, was there any way that we as a parish how did we miss this?
Well, we didn't get the Federal Register notice for some time that included that, but as soon as we did, we wrote it into our policies, and as soon as we started communicating with homeowners, we included in those communications the 2 foot.
So above. What would that time frame have been relative to the August 16th flood?
June, May 17.
So a year later?
Yes, sir.
Most people that were flooded out, they're living somewhere a year later, I would hope. It's a long time to live in a box.
I'm sorry?
But I would think with a year later, somebody would be already have rebuilt their house, and in the process, at the very minimum, they would have set the elevation.
Yes, sir.
For it.
Federal Register notice was not until late November of 2016, and by then, lots of folks had started, I'm sure.
Yeah. But you're still holding them to that?
Because the federal government is holding us to that, yes, sir. We're prohibited from putting funds into a structure that's less than 2 feet above the base flood elevation.
So, okay, one last question. Just
Yeah,
make
or
sure.
the substantial damage.
Yeah. So you had, I think you had a slide, is this correct? You've given out $530 million to homeowners that flooded? Is that the right number?
We have awarded that to people. Over 300 million has been dispersed already. Other folks are working on their house. We pay as people get their house
So
built.
300 million is what's been given to actual flood victims?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so what, do you have a contractor to give that out? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct? And how much has that contractor been paid?
I don't have that information with me, but
What was that
the
total?
overall contract, the overall labor contract for them to complete the program is 127 million.
127 million based on 1.2?
Yeah. Based on 1.3 billion in the program.
Okay.
But on a certain number of applicants. We've got some 43,000 applicants.
One last question. You breeze through these phases here of, phase 1, 2, I forgot where it was, 6 or 7, but I'm where, I didn't understand where we are in those phases.
So each homeowner is in wherever they are. We've got $300 million worth that's been dispersed. Those people are all complete.
I mean, you had first it was low to moderate income, then it was,
that
was the phases I'm talking about.
We're through all that.
We're through all those phases are
those
done.
phases ended at the end of 2017. We had invited every eligible homeowner by the end of 2017.
So you've got, I don't know, we'll use the number 1.2 less another 100 and something million, so you got about 1.1 billion left. I don't know, maybe I messed up on that math. 1.7 less 530 less another 100.
Well, we're spending, the 1.7 is all programs, so that includes match, the agriculture program, the small business.
So this is just, so I'm trying to understand how much is left.
So it will depend in large part on what we get from HUD relative to SBA guidance, because what we have asked for is to be able to give people money for every SBA loan that got counted against them as a duplication. That's gets us up to about $1 billion out of the 1.3. So if we don't get that and they give us something less than that, then we'll have.
So what happens if there's something left? Let's say there's 300 million left.
Then we will allocate it to other recovery programs, whether that's additional affordable rental housing, additional buyout programs. There are all kind of options.
So, and I promise this is the last question.
Quite all right.
I got lost in this HUD guidance thing, I'll be honest, and the differentiation between the legislation. I mean, I'm watching TV and Garrett Graves and Bill Cassidy, they telling us that we passed it. As a matter of fact, we had them sitting here and they said they passed this legislation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might have been today. I don't remember. It was pretty close to that all this was going on. Say, well, once this is passed, the duplication of benefits is gone. That's not going to be a problem. Now what I'm hearing is that there's this mystical HUD guidance that has to happen no matter whether there's legislation or not?
Yes, sir. We felt exactly the same way. I mean, the language.
Well, why do we have these congressmen? What?
Well, they passed the language as a law, and the president signed it, and so now we have the opportunity to get some relief.
What is the guidance on? Is the guidance on the law that was, the recent law that was passed, or on what?
Yes, sir. Every time that a federal agency is required to implement an appropriated amount of funds or a program, they turn around and write the rules for how they're going to do that.
So, and we don't have a time frame on that?
It could, the news that we're getting is that it will likely be this spring.
Well.
Yes.
So, and we're looking at, is that right, $200 million that are sitting there waiting to be given out based on this HUD guidance.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Mr.
I
Aaron.
appreciate you.
No. Great questions. Thank you.
One quick question.
Sir.
In the event that we get the 100-year certification for our levees, is there a potential that they will reduce the 2-foot requirement?
So this is wandering a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but if you get the 100-year certification, the areas behind that are no longer in the 100-year floodplain, so there's no
Requirement at that point?
base flood elevation there effectively. So, yeah, that eliminates that requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone, any other questions on this? Mr. President?
Mr. Pat,
Sir.
So what happened with some of our constituents? They went into, they were approved to raise their houses. I know of a couple of them right now. And they went to the permit office and said they wanted to raise their house. And so Jerome and them told them you got to go a foot above BFE. And then after they did it and they turned in the paperwork, they said you didn't go 2 feet. Now, I never saw the people's paperwork, so I'm sure it's in there. But we were never told, like Councilman Dawson said, to make people go 2 feet up. So, like these people spent their own money and it was looking for reimbursement and was approved. But I'm sure somewhere in the document it says you have to be 2 feet. Now, all of FEMA money is all HUD money or FEMA's different money?
FEMA is different source and
Okay, because I was told if you rebuild with FEMA money, 1 foot is good, correct?
that's actually true. I think that the 2 foot is a HUD requirement that we got in the
That's what I
Federal
learned
Register.
after talking to
That's correct.
our building department. They were giving permits to people 1 foot above and not knowing where they were getting their money from.
And I want to reiterate, we have ample funding, we have program procedures that we can pay for the additional elevation. Even if they've elevated up to the 1 foot, we can come back and pay for the additional elevation. So that they can get not only their grant money, but get up higher and reduce their insurance premiums.
Okay, well, we are going to pass that information on, but also, like the councilman said, we were told by the delegation that the duplication of benefits was over.
Well,
so that's kind of crazy.
When we read the language that they wrote and saw that it passed, we felt exactly the same way. We thought, we don't know how this, we were convinced that the HUD interpretation would take about a week for them to write no longer a duplication of benefits, but as it is, we are not hearing that now.
They take a month on each word.
Any other questions? Mr. Jerome, you want to close out?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peck.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that, Mr. Chairman, so thank you very much.
All right, with that, we know what they have to do to this. All right, we'll move on to number 16, approval to renew joint funding agreement. This is with the river gauges. Mr. Ron Savoy.
Yes, sir. So approval to renew the joint funding agreement with U.S. Department of Interior. It's U.S. Geological Survey, cost sharing agreement with river gauges.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. John. Any opposition to the motion? Any opposition? Not. Motion passed. Number 17, Mr. Ron.
Yes, approval to enter into a contract with Durable Piling Restoration for the repair of the Norwood Road Bridge in the amount not to exceed $39,175.
Moved by Mr. Todd, second by Mr. Johnny. Discussion, any opposition? Not. Motion passed.
Item 19 is a group of contracts up for renewal, authorization to renew following contracts for the calendar year of 2019. BFS for solid waste and debris disposal, BFI for creosote material, bridge waste material, and timber bridge disposal, and Lamadola Construction for machinery and labor for maintenance and repairs as needed for timber bridges and bulkheads. and BKI for engineering, design, and other services.
Motion.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Sadler, second by Mr. Todd.
I've
Discussion.
got to recuse on the BFI.
Mr. Deb, Mr. Dawson's gonna recuse himself. Any opposition to the motion with these? Not, motion passed. All right, number 19, Mr. Joy.
I'll go ahead and take care of that,
Oh,
too.
go ahead, Mr. Ron.
Approval for just a time extension to March 31st, 2019 for professional service contract between East Ascension Consolidated Gravity Drainage District Number 1 and BFI.
Motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Benny, second by Mr. Johnny.
Recuse.
Mr. Dawson recuse yourself. Any opposition to the motion? Not, motion passed. Number 20, executive session.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, can I ask you one thing? I'm sorry, I kind of forgot. I talked to you today about doing an emergency for that testing for bridges. District 3 has informed the residents when they live on one side of a bridge that has not been a weight test done on it, load test, that they will not cross with a fire truck. Well, this lady contacted us last week and said that she's built a new house and the insurance company and the fire department got together and they want a load test on the bridge. Now, the bridge has got people on one, we built the bridge. The state does load tests on their bridges. So I talked to the lady and I said, well, if we're both using it, if the council or the drainage board would approve, would you pay for half of the tests, which would be $1,750? So what I'm asking you is if we could approve this, in the future we'll have this to go by, plus this lady's bridge can be in this, that we will, any bridges that we own that the fire departments ask for a load test, the residents will pay for half. It costs $3,500 for the test.
I think we, what is the time? Is there any way we can move this to the
Well,
January?
the problem is the lady's got a new house and the fire truck says they will not cross that bridge without a load test to say how much the bridge can hold. This is the first time that this came up. And in the past, like Fire Chief LeBlanc said they just go by our inspections, but we never did load tests. The state does load tests.
Mr. Goulart.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic with it, and I'm not in District 3, but is there any way possible to move this, Mr. Chairman, to get a little information on it to the council meeting?
Well, if you want to make that motion.
I'll make, will that work for you, Mr.
Hold up, y'all really need to make a
agenda.
motion to amend the agenda to even discuss this before y'all making a motion what to do with it. 'Cause it's not on the agenda, so maybe let's go ahead.
Can I speak? I make a suggestion that you talk to the chairman and let's move this to the full council.
Yeah, just don't make any
Depends on
formal
who's gonna
motions on
spend the money to do it. If it's coming out of the drainage board money, it's gotta get approved here first.
Correct. That's why, and it was too late to get on the agenda.
I make a motion to amend the agenda to add this item.
I second that.
Motion and second. We'll put that
Roll
at,
call.
I'm gonna get your roll, 19A. Roll call, Ms. Deb.
Daniel Satterley,
Yes.
Randy Clulott,
Yes.
Aaron Long,
Yes.
Terry Cathey,
Yes.
Todd Lambert,
Yes.
Yes.
Benny Johnson,
Yes.
Bill Dawson,
Yes.
Dempsey Lane.
Yes.
Thank y'all.
All right, we'll move that to,
Next.
Now,
we're gonna take it up now, but what's the, recommendation from the, Drainage Board to bring to full council or?
Correct.
I think we make a motion that the drainage board go ahead and pay half of it. And, if it's gotta go to the full council,
You familiar
Yeah.
with this, your area?
I'm kind of familiar with it, but I mean.
Can we who owns that bridge?
Can we get a
Who
little
does something we
clarification?
build?
It's our bridges. We're talking about. State does their loss. But when it's our bridge, now this has never come up before, but District 3 is saying they will not cross a parish bridge that doesn't have a load test on it that can handle a fire truck.
Public bridge is.
A public, well, it's for public, not just for one private house type thing.
Fire District 3 saying that.
And according to, I mean, when a fire truck crosses it, that's public, makes it public. But I just thought that we shouldn't carry the whole burden because they do have people live on the other side of the bridge. So whether one person or all of them over there pays, we only pay half. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just got, being we made this public and we put it on the agenda, I just got a quick question. Where the hell is this? I mean.
On White Road.
And how many, in District 3, how many parish bridges do we have?
The chief told me not a whole lot, but he couldn't tell me.
What is, Mr. Legal, what is that legal for the fire District 3 to just say that they're not crossing the bridge without a load test?
Well, I think you got.
I'm not questioning the fire department, I'm questioning the legality, where we stand. Today it's one bridge, tomorrow's at 50. That's, I just
Well,
wanna
I
know.
think from legal, my concern would be, okay, we load test these things, but what happens if it fails? Then who's the responsibility going to be on? That's going to be something that we probably going to have to look into a little bit further, and maybe do some kind of pro rata agreement type deal.
And when we use it, we were doing 50/50 on a bridge.
Yeah.
When we use a bridge.
I don't think it's open for public. I think
All right,
they got it
well-
on that driveway.
Benny, your motion still stands?
I don't want to vote on it if I don't know what is this all about? Where are we going here? That's all.
Well, I mean.
Nothing against the fire
No,
department.
I mean,
nothing
what
against
the
anybody.
chief's looking at, from my perspective, and a little bit that I've heard about it, is basically, I mean, when you go across that bridge, especially with a tank truck, you got a couple thousand gallons of water on it, which is pretty heavy. And so he's not wanting to risk the equipment on a potential that you may have a collapse of the bridge without knowing that's something, that it's capable of handling that load. That's kind of where he's coming from with it. I mean, it's a couple $100,000 investment. It's our equipment as well. It belongs to the parish, right?
Well,
But that's where he's coming from with it. Now, the
I think-
legalities and all of it are something else that I haven't had a discussion with anybody about.
What do we build our
It's a
bridge
safety
standards
issue.
to? What do we build? We build 10,000-pound bridges? We build 50,000? What?
Our parish bridges are built to handle any vehicle that's able to get on the state on the highway. I done run through that.
Is this an old bridge or is it brand new?
On a
No.
parish bridge.
This bridge, we inspected it, but we never done a weight load test on it. And this is something that District 3 just came out and asked, well, they asked us to do it, so I said, I don't think we should pay the whole,
Does a school bus pass on it?
I presume so.
Well, I mean, I'ma just use Lawridge Road. I got tandem dump trucks passing on that bridge every day. I mean, if we load tested it, I don't know where we're going.
The state's the only one that load tests their bridges. They'll inspect our bridges, but they don't load test them.
We need to talk to fire district.
All right,
So-
we have a motion and a second on paying half of the load test.
Was it still a motion? Is he still making a motion?
Guys, before y'all vote on anything, O'Neill did send me a proposed resolution today, but it sounds like y'all not ready to go this far. It was just to authorize the parish president to enter into CEA agreements with these landowners regarding the fee sharing on the bridge testing. But it sounds like y'all may have some more questions on that, so if y'all want to just address this specific issue that Kenny's bringing up now, maybe we'll take some time to look at this a little bit further and bring it back to y'all next month if y'all would like to do that.
The resolution, what it says is to negotiate with the landowners, but this one lady said she would pay half of it. So to me, it doesn't matter if one pay or 10 of them pay, as long as it's paid by the residents and we only pay half.
Yeah, but
Where is the
that's
bridge?
just one case. The next case is gonna be repaid.
It's across from St. John Church.
All right, do we have a motion and a second, or is this gonna fail to lack a Second.
He's got a motion.
Got a motion?
Got a motion?
What's your motion, Ray?
The original motion was to go ahead and pay for the half of the weight
This
test
particular one.
on this particular
On this
bridge,
bridge
yeah.
only.
And then come back with a
Come back later on with the rest of this.
Is this
policy.
this much of an emergency? I'm just asking.
Well, the lady has a new house, and the insurance company was told that if it catches on fire, that the fire truck would not cross the bridge without a load test. The bridge is in good shape. We changed the boards on the top of this year, but
Gotta test every
we didn't do a load test. We inspected it, though.
I don't have enough information to support it.
Do we have a second?
I'd like to see where exactly the bridge is.
Prairieville.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the white road, I just can't find it.
I don't know exactly what bridge it is, no.
Well,
It's a
due
bridge that
to the
somebody
lack of
dropped.
second, we'll move us to the next meeting
You had a
and,
second, didn't you?
no, he never did say it. We'll move on to number 20, the executive session, Ms. Devon.
Motion.
We just need a motion to go.
Roll
into
call,
executive
please.
Daniel Satterley,
Yes.
Randy Fluon,
Yes.
Aaron Lawler.
Yes.
Sherry Cazo.
Yes.
Todd Lambert.
Yes.
John Cagnolati.
Yes.
Kenny Johnson.
Yes.
Bill Dawson. Timothy Lyon.
Yes.
Bill Dawson.
Yes. We're gonna test every bridge?
John probably went home.
There we go.
Motion to reconvene.
Second.
Reconvene, second by Mr. Johnny. Will, Mr. Cluett.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Second.
adjourn.